You're listening to Rail Technology's Track Talk podcast, to guide you beyond the headlines with news, views, and insider truths from across the rail industry. This episode of Track Talk is brought to you in association with KeTech, specialists in communication, information, and rail technologies. Welcome back to this episode of Rail Technology Magazine's Track Talk podcast. I'll be your host today, Matt Roberts, editor of Rail Technology Magazine, and today we'll be talking all around the sort of theme of improving passenger experience. As we start to see more and more passengers come back onto our railway network, it's going to be increasingly important that we rebuild confidence and we give them an experience that ticks their needs and hopefully helps us grow to even greater levels than we had before. To help me answer some of the questions and get a real insight into this topic, I'm delighted to be joined by Martin Howard, a customer service officer at Chiltern Railways. Thank you so much for joining me today, Martin.
Morning, Matt. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And so we'll jump straight in, Martin. First off, would you mind introducing yourself a little further? Explain sort of what your role at Chiltern Railways involves. What does a customer service officer do?
So I work on the commercial and customer strategy team. So I've got a sort of multifaceted role. The bit that I suggest you're most interested in is relating to customer information. And part of my role really is to ensure that real-time or near real-time information flows are as accurate and as relevant as we can make them for our customers. This would include unplanned disruption, engineering work and special events as well. One of the things that we're very proud of is that we run trains to Wembley Stadium, and obviously that has a big impact on customers who go to sporting events as well as our normal customers as well.
Definitely. And obviously passenger experience, sort of the information they're given and the experience they have travelling with yourselves is one of the key metrics we have to success on the railway. Do you think we are currently doing enough, sort of either with yourselves or more broadly, to provide a positive passenger experience and provide that information to them?
Naturally, I would say yes, but the reality is that it's a real balancing act. There's always more that we can do. But in the current environment, we've got to just prioritise what we do. And we do that a lot. So at the moment, for example, one of the key things that many of our customers are interested in as they return to the railway are information about how busy their train is going to be, what social distancing is going to be like, and generally what they can expect of their journey. Many of our customers haven't travelled with us for well over a year now, and every week we're just seeing more and more people come back to the railway. And it's really, really important that we can help them to travel with confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, sort of it is finding that balancing act. And from yourself at Chiltern, what's some of the work you've done and some of the work you've undertaken to improve the experience of passengers on their own services?
So one of the big things that we've spent our time doing over the last year is having a real understanding of how many people are travelling on our trains. And we've used quite a lot of technology to achieve that because the trains that we use are fairly old, so we don't weigh trains or anything like that. And so what we do is that we model and we record and we monitor how many people are on our trains. We load that information into industry systems so that our ticketing systems, our live departure boards on our apps can see that information and then present to customers icons that show them how busy they can expect individual trains to be. Because once customers can see that one train is likely to be busy, whereas the next train 5 or 10 minutes later is likely to be much quieter, then many of them will choose, obviously, to move to a slightly quieter train, particularly as customers who aren't used to travelling on the railway are somewhat they're a little nervous.
And that sort of that punctuality and delivering that information that's not just sort of reliable, but it is up to date and it's constantly updating. That helps the passenger sort of have that more thorough experience. They can, as you say, potentially make decisions that make themselves feel more confident. Maybe that's going on a sort of later, less busy train, or just having a better understanding of what they're to expect when that train pulls into the station, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, we the journey stage is broken down. So you've got your pre-journey stage. So that's when customers are typically buying tickets, maybe before they even get to the station. So what we do is we flag to customers both with icons on our own apps and on our website how busy a train's likely to be. And if we've got experience of a train being particularly busy, we also work with industry colleagues at National Rail to make sure that specific messaging is put on place so that they might be aware which part of the journey is likely to be the busiest. And as I say, when they move on to the station, they will then get announcements to say how busy a train is likely to be. So all in all, we are finding that customers are really appreciating it, and we can tell from the feedback that we're getting that they are paying attention to the messaging that we're pumping out now.
And I believe I'm right in understanding that to deliver a lot of that information, obviously you've worked with industry partners, one in particular being KeTech, to implement sort of solutions. So how sort of solutions and working with the likes of KeTech helped you improve that passenger experience?
Yeah, so KeTech provide the customer information systems that we use at all of the stations that we manage. And they've generally been very, very proactive at helping us to keep up to date with the technology. And they've been very receptive to making some quite short notice changes to our systems. So, for example, the software that we use has recently been updated, but before the update, they were able to make some very short notice changes in relation to social distancing messaging. In fact, they managed to work over a weekend to get some changes made to the software so that we were able to react to what our customers wanted and just to help us to stay ahead of the game, really.
And I suppose, how important is it that sort of operators like yourselves at Chiltern, you work closely with the rail supply chain to discover and develop these innovations, but also, I suppose, as you mentioned there, be quite reactive to changing need as well?
It's vitally important. So obviously, a lot of industry partners, they work with different train operators, but they don't always understand what's going on a day-to-day basis. So we meet up with them regularly. We review what the current hotspots are. But it's a two-way dialogue because we have to understand what they're looking at, developments that they're making for other operators, and also just generally to build on the technology that they're using. Obviously, reliability is key to us. And recently, for example, KeTech have moved the brain behind our operating system. They've moved it from a server based in one of our data centers into the cloud, which has actually made everything a lot more reliable and has helped us to reduce our costs as well.
And I suppose, just to add on to that, that is one of the sort of maybe the considerations that until you're in and involved with these sort of organisations, with these industry partners, we don't necessarily always see. I think from an outside, you view it very much of, oh, well, it's a business working with an operator to do this. But actually, we're all pushing in the same direction, aren't we? Which is to deliver this positive experience for a passenger, this reliable experience.
Absolutely. I mean, customers are constantly telling us that accurate and up-to-date information is so important to them. Over the last few years, we've seen customer behaviour change. So now probably 90% of our customers have got a smartphone in their pocket. So they expect the information that they see on their smartphone to match what they see on the internet, to match what they see on our stations and sometimes on our trains as well. It's only by working with people like KeTech that we can ensure that everything matches up and that we're constantly improving the quality of the information. It's probably we get more feedback other than how the train's running. The next most important thing that our customers talk to us about is the quality of the information that they receive.
Yeah, as you sort of touched on there, we've seen sort of over the last number of years a dramatic change in sort of the kinds of things customers expect. As you say, everyone now has a smartphone in our pocket that I think we often take for granted. But particularly over the last 18 months, we've seen an even more dramatic shift from passenger numbers changing to the types of things passengers want from a good experience. These are likely to continue as well and likely to introduce new challenges going forward. So do you think that's maybe reprioritise some of the innovations or some of the areas that we're particularly looking to focus on compared to, say, maybe 2-3 years ago?
Yes, it has. I mean, sorry if I keep on going back to it again, but our customers are finding it very, very important that they know that how long their train is going to be. They want to know how busy their train is. And we've spent a lot of time and effort over the last couple of years, particularly since the start of the pandemic, to change our systems so that now, for example, and it might seem a simple thing to a lot of people, our systems now automatically know how long every train is, and that's displayed at the stations and it's announced at the stations. There was a huge amount of work went into doing that because we had to integrate our systems so that our fleet teams made sure that their information was always up to date. And then tied in with that as well, at some of our stations, depending on the length of a train, the announcements that are made are also enhanced so that it tells customers where on the station platform a train is going to stop. That's really important to us and it's important to our customers because it means that then you don't get customers bunching up all into one or two carriages. It means that people aren't running for trains, so it reduces the likelihood of slips, trips and falls. Actually, it improves punctuality as well because if you've got customers positioned optimally for where a train is likely to stop, then it means that a train gets loaded quicker. So you're less likely to have delays at a station while a train is there.
They're all such important aspects that, as you say, come from what's quite a simple sort of change, simply having information that's not just when the train's arriving, but the length of it and where it's stopping, which, as someone that was on a train travelling up the country the other day, I very much wish was in every station because it is that thing. But it's little things like that that to a passenger seems so simple and such a simple change, but unless yourselves had thought about it, had worked with the partners, wouldn't have been realised. And I suppose a lot of that probably comes from honest conversations, both with suppliers, but also with the actual customers themselves to understand where these pain points are and the simple things we can do to fix them.
Yes, I think that's very true, and that's the benefit that I have, I suppose, of working with customers all the time. I see a huge amount of the feedback that we receive as a business from our customers, and we actually use that information as well to react quite quickly. So if we haven't got something quite right, what we'll do is we'll go away and we'll look at the customer's feedback and we'll work out whether it was down to a misunderstanding, whether it was down to a mistake, or whether it's actually something that we can then look to improve on so that more customers benefit from things being better in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose whenever we talk innovation or whenever I talk innovation, it always seems that the question that I end up getting asked or I have to ask is around how did you sort of convince the senior decision makers to invest in this? But for simple things like passenger experience, it's a win-win for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've recently, as I say, just updated the software that we use on our customer information system. It was the first time it had a major overhaul for a number of years. And to be honest, it wasn't very difficult to make the persuading case. We survey our customers quite regularly. National Rail survey customers, and consistently they're telling us that they want the quality of the information that they receive to be improved. And that, of course, the most important time when that happens is when things aren't going quite to plan. So whenever there's any disruption on the railway and trains are cancelled or they're delayed, then really that's when customers have the biggest need to know what's going on, because at the end of the day, they're not really bothered about their train journey. They just want to get to where they're going, and they want to get to where they're going in the best possible way. You know, we're a utility. If you're traveling from one end of the country to another, it might be a major part of your day. But for many of our customers, they just want to get to work or they just want to get home.
Definitely. And and I will warn you now because it's just come in my mind, so I'm very much springing the question on you. But I suppose one of the other considerations we have with that as well is, as you say, the train journey for most customers is just simply a part of their daily routine. Is it a consideration that yourselves have had to not just take into effect the information that affects the train service themselves, but how that then has helped sort of inform people to the follow-on journey or informs people ahead of arriving? I imagine quite a lot of that is already starting to be come into effect through the likes of the sort of apps and information. Is that a direction you think we're maybe heading more?
Yes, I think it certainly will, and as technology changes, it will become more and more important. One of the things that we're doing is on some of our trains, the screens that we have on the trains are providing better information about what's going on at the destination, particularly if customers are heading to London. The displays that are in the carriages on our trains show the status of all of the London Underground lines when they're due to arrive into London. Another thing that we're looking at the moment, as well as we're working with Network Rail and across the industry, so that we're able to make live announcements, or even in the future, potentially pre-recorded announcements on our trains from our control centres, so that when we become aware of particular things, we'll be able to make much better announcements on our trains as the journeys progress.
And it's all that just full circle journey to making people more informed. We've alluded to some of it there already, but I suppose my next question is around sort of as we go into the future. How do you aim to sort of continue to enhance the current systems you have and potentially the spaces where we've not yet got a system for it to continue to improve this experience of passengers?
So if we look at working with our partners, certainly in terms of what we've got on our stations, we'll look to continue to upgrade our systems as and when we can. So that will look to improve the quality of the information that's on the platform screens. So, for example, if a train is running slightly late, it will show customers where the train is, and it will also make the same by way of announcements. I think in terms of the broader question that you have, I think it's probably going to revolve around the use of the information that we hold on customers to make sure that we know that particularly if they've booked to travel on particular trains, and if there is disruption, we'll be looking to be able to contact customers proactively before the journey, or even once a train has left its originating station, to let them know what's going on. That obviously is relatively complicated when you operate a commuter railway like we do, because we often don't always know what trains customers are going to be travelling on. But we do have the ability for customers to be able to register for alerts and that sort of thing, so that they are kept up to date with the progress of their journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's sort of the crux of it all, isn't it? That ultimately, obviously, in running a smooth and successful railway, we hope that there's never a situation for disruption or delay. But given the nature of what it is, that there will always be circumstances for it. It's just ensuring that we can mitigate the sort of impact, or at the very least, the bad experience a passenger may have, sort of because of that delay. As you say, potentially notifying them ahead of their journey or during it, so that they don't simply arrive at a station, see it's delayed, and have that groan that I think we've all done.
Yes, and I think as customers start to return to the railway, it is important that we remember that they're all people as well. I was at a station earlier today, and unfortunately there was a train that was cancelled, and I was able to advise customers how best to make the journey to their destination. The challenge for us is, how do we then make use of technology so that you don't rely on people being at stations and talking one-to-one with passengers? Where our aim is, moving forward, that customers will get that sort of information automatically, whether it's on their smartphones or perhaps whether it's over the speakers and the screens at the station. Every little bit of information helps. Because all our customers want is to be better informed.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a nice sort of way to tie this all together. As you say, more information is never a bad thing, and making sure passengers are informed is the benefit that we have for all of this. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, Martin. It's been thoroughly insightful. I don't think there's been a moment throughout today that I've not hasn't both resonated with myself as a rail passenger and also generally just made sense. Passenger experience to me is always that great subject that in the rail industry, it's something that we all push in one direction for. It just makes sense to make it a more enjoyable experience, a more resistance-free experience, isn't it?
Well, thanks for your time, Matt. I really appreciate it, and I've enjoyed our conversation.
And just as a final part, if people wanted to hear more or find out a little bit more about the work that yourselves at Chiltern are doing, is there anywhere best for them to go to find out?
Yeah, sure. What we'll do is we'll put something on our website with a link to this podcast, and I'm always happy to cover off any questions individually if people are interested.
Amazing. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Martin, and hopefully that's been as interesting to our audience as it has been to me. This episode of Track Talk is brought to you in association with KeTech, specialists in communication, information, and rail technologies. Thanks for listening to this episode of RTM's Track Talk podcast. Join the conversation on social media or get in touch with the link on our website. To stay up to date with all the latest news and episodes, subscribe and give us a rating on whatever streaming service you are using. This has been Rail Technology Magazine's Track Talk podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.